I moved into the apartment at the end of February, when the snow still clung to the sidewalks like a warning that the worst wasn't over. It was a quiet building tucked behind a hardware store, wedged between an alley and an abandoned car wash. The rent was cheap, and I didn't ask questions. After the year I'd had, I just needed silence. No roommates, no noise, no expectations. Just four walls and a locked door. The place was smaller, single room, with a kitchenette and a narrow bathroom where the tiles peeled at the edges. But it was mine, and that was something I hadn't been able to say in a long time. I spent the first 2 weeks unpacking slowly, sorting through what little I owned, convincing myself that peace could live here. The neighbors didn't bother me, or if they did, I couldn't hear them. The walls were thick, lined with that strange, outdated insulation that made every sound feel like it had to fight its way out. I worked nights at the university library, which meant I often came home when the city was already asleep. I liked that. The walk home was dark and still, and there was something comforting in knowing that nobody was watching. Inside, I'd make tea, leave the window cracked open just enough to feel the cold on my fingers, and let myself exist in the quiet. Sometimes, I'd read. Sometimes I'd just sit and listen. There was one thing I noticed almost immediately, though I didn't dwell on it at first. Behind the plaster of the back wall, just above the old radiator, there was a faint sound. It came and went like breath through fabric. Not loud, not even persistent, just enough to make me pause when the room fell completely still. I chalked it up to pipes. Old buildings always wheezed and moaned. I'd lived in worse. By the third week I began keeping a journal, not of anything specific, just moments. A dream I'd had. A line from a book. The way the light hit the wall in the morning. It was a habit I'd picked up from my grandmother, who swore that writing kept the mind from drifting. She used to say, if you don't name the days, they forget you were in them. That stuck with me. Looking back, the apartment didn't change me. Not yet. But it did something subtler. It slowed me down, made me pay attention. To sounds, to silences, to the space between them. It's strange how quickly a place can begin to feel like it's watching you back. The first time I truly noticed it, I was brushing my teeth. It was late past 2 a.m., and the room was lit only by the dim glow of the hallway bulb that always flickered before dying. I leaned over the sink, staring at my tired reflection, when I felt it, a vibration, low and brief, pulsing through the floor beneath my bare feet. It wasn't the typical shudder of an old building settling. It was more deliberate, like something had shifted with intention beneath the wood. I froze, listening. The pipes were silent. No footsteps above, no wind through the cracked window. Just that fading tremor and the kind of silence that feels like it's holding its breath. I tried to forget about it, told myself it could have been the heater kicking in, or the floorboards warping from the cold. But from that night forward, the rhythm of the apartment changed. The breathing sound behind the wall returned more frequently, always at odd hours just before dawn, or moments after I turned out the lights. I timed it once. 3 slow exhalations, followed by stillness, then 4, then nothing for hours. It wasn't random, it felt like patterned, like it was learning. A few nights later, I woke up sweating, even though the room was freezing. I'd left the window cracked again. The breathing was louder this time, closer, almost human in cadence. I pressed my ear to the wall, expecting the familiar murmur of water or distant television noise. But it wasn't that. It sounded like someone just on the other side, slow, controlled, and steady. I whispered, half laughing, "Hello." Immediately, the sound stopped, and then something tapped. Once, then twice more. I stepped back, heart racing, and waited. Nothing followed, no reply. But I didn't sleep that night. I told myself it had to be a neighbor. Maybe the building's structure was tricking the sound. Old architecture did strange things with acoustics. I even knocked on the adjacent unit the next day, but no one answered. I checked with the landlord. Unit 3B had been empty since November. Water damage, he said. No plans to fix it yet. Still, I tried to explain it away. I left music playing. At night, turned on the old fan in the corner to drown the quiet. But no matter how much noise I added, the breathing returned. Not every night, but often enough that I began to dread the silence. And once, as I lay perfectly still, eyes wide, in the dark, I swear I heard a voice whisper from behind the wall, as if testing the word carefully on its tongue. 3. By the end of that week, I stopped inviting anyone over. Not that I had many visitors to begin with, but I couldn't bear the thought of someone else hearing it, too validating the dread I was working so hard to dismiss. I told myself I was tired, overworked, stretched too thin. I even started recording the sounds on my phone, hoping to catch something concrete. But the files always came back empty. Silence, as if whatever was behind the wall knew when it was being watched. Then came the drawer. One morning, I found the bottom drawer of my kitchen cabinet pulled open. Nothing inside had been touched, but the drawer one I never used was fully extended. I closed it and stood for a moment, staring. It was early. I hadn't had coffee yet. Easy to write it off. But when it happened again the next day, I couldn't ignore it. I began to check the walls, literally, tapping them, running. My fingers along the seams were paint-chipped or nails stuck out slightly. The apartment had quirks I knew, but suddenly they all felt more like secrets. My bathroom mirror had a hairline crack I'd never noticed before. The closet door in my bedroom wouldn't stay closed, even after I wedged a chair against it, and there was always that humming, barely audible, like an old TV left on in another room. People at work noticed something off. I started coming in late, drinking more coffee than usual, forgetting meetings. My supervisor asked if everything was okay. I lied, told her I was sleeping poorly, seasonal blues. That was partly true. At night, I stayed up with the lights on. I began marking time, literally jotting down when the breathing started, when the drawer moved, when the tapping resumed. There were patterns. The breathing came between 2 o'clock and 2:10 a.m., the tapping usually 3 or 4 slow. Knocks came after 3 a.m., the drawer moved at dawn. It wasn't random. It was routine. I called a friend, finally trying to laugh it off. Told him the place might be haunted. He chuckled, offered to bring over sage, joked about moving in with me for a few days. But when I invited him, genuinely this time, he paused. "Actually," he said, "I've been having weird dreams since we talked last week about walls." He didn't elaborate, and the worst part, I hadn't told him anything about the walls. It happened on a Thursday. A forgettable day in every sense, gray skies, cold coffee, inbox full of junk. I had almost convinced myself the past few weeks were just stress-induced, that I needed sleep, or maybe therapy. But that night, something crossed the line from unsettling to undeniable. I had just finished brushing my teeth and turned off the bathroom light when I saw it in my hallway. Dimly lit by the glow from my bedroom, was no longer empty. There was a figure at the end of it, half in shadow. Not moving, not speaking, just there. My first instinct wasn't fear, it was confusion. You know that moment when your brain tries to make sense of something illogical? I blinked, thinking it might be a trick of the light, but it didn't vanish. I stood frozen, toothbrush still in hand, heart crawling up my throat. The figure didn't move. It looked human, but the proportions were off too tall, limbs a little too long. Like something drawn by someone who didn't quite understand anatomy. My mind screamed for logic. A coat rack, a reflection. But there was no coat rack, and nothing to reflect. Then, just as suddenly, it stepped back into the dark and disappeared. Not turned, not walked. Away, just dissolved into the black, like a curtain had dropped behind it. I barely slept. In the morning, I combed through the hallway for anything smudges, footprints. Something to prove to myself it wasn't a hallucination. Nothing. But that was the moment everything changed. I couldn't pretend anymore. Whatever this was, it had noticed me. A shift had happened, and I could feel it in the way the apartment breathed. That's the only word I have for it, breathed. The walls seemed to expand and contract ever so slightly, like the whole place was alive. The air grew heavy in specific rooms. The lights flickered even though I replaced the bulbs. My phone started losing battery overnight, even when plugged in. I heard my own voice whispering from another room. Just once, but it was enough to make me sit up all night, staring at the crack beneath the door, waiting. I stopped going to work, stopped answering texts. The idea of letting someone in felt dangerous now, like it would expose them to something I still couldn't name. The fear was no longer psychological. It was physical. My body knew it before my mind caught up. My skin prickled even in stillness, as if something was inches away. I didn't know what it wanted, but I knew this wasn't just a haunting. It was an invitation, or a warning. The days began blending together, not in a haze of boredom or routine, but in that strange way trauma stretches time. Mornings lost their certainty. I'd wake up unsure if I had truly slept or simply blacked out. The apartment felt foreign now, like a borrowed space that rejected my presence. Objects moved, subtly. Nothing dramatic, just enough to dismantle trust in my own memory. A mug would be in the sink when I remembered placing it on the counter, a drawer left slightly ajar, the faucet dripping even after I turned it tight. I started writing things down, times, positions of objects, my own movements to track reality, but the notes began contradicting themselves. I'd write kitchen light off at 10:12 p.m. and find it blinding at midnight. I thought about installing cameras, but something inside me whispered not to, as if watching it would give it power, or worse, show me something I couldn't unsee. My reflection became unreliable. At first, just delays, my face lingering half a second longer when I turned away. Then inconsistencies, a twitch that didn't match mine, eyes that blinked too slowly. I avoided mirrors after that, covered them with sheets like a grieving widow. The whispers grew bolder, always from another room, always just low enough that I couldn't make out the words, but they weren't random. They were urgent, coaxing. At night, I pressed my ear to the bedroom wall and heard a slow, steady tapping like fingers on hollow wood. I once knocked back. It responded. My dreams turned vivid. I stood in my apartment, only darker, more decayed. The wallpaper peeled like old skin, and always, at the end of the hall, the same shape stood still, watching, patient. I woke gasping, convinced I had brought part of that world back with me. I tried to leave once, packed a bag, opened the door, and the hallway of my building stretched unnaturally long, impossibly narrow. The lights flickered down its spine like vertebrae. I stepped back inside and locked the door. Paranoia bloomed. I distrusted every sound, every object. The stove hissed, went off. The television turned on with static at 3:33 a.m. exactly. My cat, Charlie, stared at the same corner of the ceiling for hours, unmoving. One morning, I found him hiding inside the cabinet under the sink, trembling, fur slick with something I couldn't identify. I wasn't losing my mind. I was peeling back something. A layer of reality, maybe. A veil too thin. Whatever this was, it had intention, not random chaos, but structure. It was leading me somewhere, and I was beginning to follow. It happened on a night that didn't feel like night at all. The air in the study had gone still, like the room itself was holding its breath. The typewriter sat there, black and waiting, its keys faintly glistening with moisture like a cold animal waiting to pounce. Michael hadn't eaten in almost a day. His eyes were bloodshot, his hands trembling from a blend of exhaustion and something else, something he didn't have a name for. When he sat down in front of the typewriter, it began before he even touched the keys, a single click. Then another. The carriage slid to the right, aligning itself. Michael didn't move. His fingers hovered, unsure, unwilling. The keys began to press on their own. I see you. The words stamped out slowly, one after another, the ribbon jerking with mechanical precision. Michael's chest constricted. This wasn't a metaphor. This wasn't inspiration or madness, or grief. It was something real. He stood up sharply, the chair falling backward. "No," he whispered. "I'm done." But the typewriter kept going. "Don't leave." The study door slammed shut behind him, though he hadn't touched it. A draft of window, breath brushed past his ear. His skin erupted in goosebumps. The light bulb above flickered violently, then burst, showering the room in sparks and glass. Only the dim glow of the typewriter remained. Michael backed away into the corner. "What do you want from me?" he asked, barely louder than a breath. "The typewriter answered. "Finish what you started." In that moment, he understood. The story wasn't a haunting, it was a hunger. It needed him, fed on his thoughts, his fears, his pain. Every page bled him dry, word by word. But it wasn't just feeding. It was growing, becoming Dot. He stepped forward, almost against his will, as though the floor pulled his legs forward, like a treadmill. He dropped into the chair again. His fingers met the keys. And this time, the story wrote fast. Furious, he didn't know what he was typing. His vision blurred. He could barely breathe, but he couldn't stop. Images flashed through his mind. A man watching from behind the wall, breath clouding the plaster. A voice counting backward. A scream inside a tunnel. A child's voice whispering the last page. The final line appeared. His fingers typed it before he read it. When he did, his body went cold. The story ends when you do. And then, silence. Only the click of the return carriage. And then, darkness. Morning light crept reluctantly through the study's grimy window, illuminating the dust motes suspended like frozen ash in the air. The typewriter sat silent, still. Its keys no longer glistened with sweat or blood or anything unnameable. The room looked ordinary, now just a cramped space with cracked shelves, peeling wallpaper, and an old writing desk. But Michael was gone. No one knew for how long. Days, weeks. The mailbox overflowed, newspapers yellowed at the foot of the door, and the lights in the house remained off, even at night. Neighbors whispered. A delivery man claimed he heard someone talking inside, low, rhythmic, as though reading aloud. But no one answered when he knocked. When the landlord finally entered, he found the study untouched, save for the faint, iron-smelling smear on the typewriter keys and a thick manuscript beside it. Over 300 pages, no title, no author. He skimmed the first few lines. The words gripped tightly, cold and sharp, like fingers wrapping around his neck. The prose was too vivid, too intimate, as though the thoughts had been stolen from his own head. He dropped it after the 5th page, hands trembling, mouth dry. "It's just a story," he muttered to no one. That night he dreamed of dark walls breathing, of words forming on their own, of a man sitting in the corner of the room, eyes locked forward but hollow, like he had seen too much and couldn't unsee any of it. Police searched the house. No signs of struggle. No body. No prints but Michael's. Official reports filed it as a missing person case. But the few who read even a page of the manuscript never forgot what it said. Not the plot, no one could recall that, but the feeling, like the story had seen them, like they'd become part of it. Months passed. The manuscript vanished. The house was sold to a couple from out of town. They said they liked the charm of the study. He was a writer too. On their first night, as boxers still lined the walls, he sat at the desk and opened his laptop. But when he looked up, the typewriter was already there, glinting dully in the half-light, and beside it, a note. 6 words, typed carefully in all caps. "Your turn to finish the story." He looked at his wife, confused, but she hadn't written it. She hadn't even entered the room. He turned back to the note. It was gone. Only the keys remained, waiting.